Rumble. Hey, everybody, we're on Rumble. We are the 2 Men and a Bible. I'm Jeff.
I'm Joel.
And again, Joel giggled. We giggle every time. But anyway.
Well, sometimes just looking at Jeff makes a person.
Hey, guys, today the 2 Men and a Bible are talking about not only the Bible, but we're continuing to promote Measure 4. There it is right there on the screen. Thank you, Jason. And before we get into that, Joel's going to read a Bible verse.
Well,
Exodus 20, verse
a lot of
15.
people think that property tax has nothing to do with the scriptures.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that it does. It has everything to do with,
Yeah,
or the Bible
huge.
speaks to this issue.
Yeah.
And one of the places that speaks to it is found in Exodus chapter 20. And believe it or not, chapter 20 is about the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
And I think Jeff and Shane talked about the 10 Commandments
Yes.
a couple times ago, but
Yep.
or into the future. I'm not sure
Yeah.
which is the way it's going to go. But they just did a show on it anyway. And
That's right.
verse 13 says, "You shall not commit murder." 14, "You shall not commit adultery." 15, "You shall not steal."
Hmm.
And I really believe that property tax is stealing from people. I really honestly believe that. But there's one more verse that speaks to this, and it's found in verse 17. "You shall not covet your neighbor's house." And
Interesting.
here we are. The government is constantly coveting your house
That's right.
by making you, forcing you, involuntarily telling you, or excuse me, they're volunteering, but we have to involuntarily give them
Yeah.
taxes. And they choose how much taxes you're going to pay.
Yeah.
And it's not negotiable with you at all.
No.
They just make up their numbers,
Yeah.
and they just keep increasing the value of your home, and
Yeah.
then increasing, therefore, the cost of your tax. And verse 17, "You shall not covet your neighbor's house."
I'm glad you brought that one up, because what's really being honored and valued here, what's being protected, and really you could say all of at least the last 7 commands of the 10 commandments are valuing your own property,
Yes.
personal home, private property. And what's the cornerstone of conservative thinking? Private property.
Private ownership.
It's supposed to be highly valued.
And we're
Don't mess
supposed to
with
be
it.
free people.
Yeah, don't even want your neighbor's stuff.
Right.
Just leave it alone. Let him live. And that's one place that a person shouldn't have to worry about having something taken away, is your home.
I'm even of the belief, this is gonna ruffle some feathers here, but we're good at that, aren't we? I really struggle with all these ordinances. I mean, I appreciate ordinances in some respects, but to have an ordinance that says I can only have 2 vehicles on my property, or can only have 1 vehicle on my property, it's my property. If I
Right.
want to have 84 vehicles
Yeah.
on my property, I should be able to have 84 vehicles on
Yeah.
my property. If
Yeah.
it doesn't look nice in the town, it doesn't look nice in the town. I mean, why does the government have the right to take that away? Now, I do appreciate, on the other side of that coin, is if you move into a residence and there's all kinds of ordinances that are set up beforehand, you know what you're buying. You know what you're going into. But to make ordinances after the fact, no.
Interesting.
I can't accept that. We have a guy in our town who wants to, this is so unbelievable, but here goes. He wants there to never be a vehicle in someone's property that isn't in the garage. I'm serious.
Well, yeah, and he's going to end up on city council, and he's going to get 4
Yeah.
people to agree with him.
Yeah, and so then they'll get this to pass. No, you can't. I don't think you should be able to write an ordinance after the fact. Now, I appreciate if there's a whole, place where there would be a whole bunch of dwellings built in the future, and you know that you can't have a vehicle outside of a garage, that's fine because you've already made that
But
agreement.
the free market would handle that issue better
That's correct.
anyway.
Yep.
And I don't know if it was your town or maybe it was here in mine. I can't remember hearing about. They're having a discussion about what color your door cannot be,
Oh, no
your front
kidding.
door. So, I think that's when it was sort of in to have orange or red or blue or purple door or whatever. But just the fact they're even having the discussion
They
tells you
shouldn't
that's
have that.
socialistic type of thinking. But anyway,
That's like
so
deciding what color carpet should be in your church.
well, yeah, could you imagine the
Well,
government doing
we
that?
had a decision like that. Half the congregation wanted it red because it used to be red, and
Yeah.
half the congregation wanted it blue because it was red before.
But you know what? That is an appropriate place to have that fight, that discussion.
At least,
In a church,
yeah,
in your home, go ahead and argue with your wife about what color carpet you want to have.
yep.
And good luck winning on that one. Anyway, back to property tax. So you can see on the screen here that we just want to make sure that you want to vote yes. We're promoting the yes on the measure 4. Joel and I, as citizens, we are promoting yes on 4. And it just simply says that it supports prohibiting or stopping the state and local governments, okay? Not people. It's stopping them from taxing the assessed value of your home. In other words, they can't just say, well, your home's worth 250,000 or 300,000, so we're going to tax on that. They can't do that anymore
In the
except
last
for
4
loans.
years for mine, it's gone up 50% in
Yeah.
value.
So we'd rather have you put that money back in your pocket as a citizen. See, when a lot of the people that oppose this measure, when they use the term local control, what they mean is the local government. When we talk about local control, we're talking about the citizen. And there's a big difference. You got
Yes,
to watch
yep.
out for that, folks, because what they're really trying to do is still prop up government. It's just, instead of the state, we want the local government. Well, that's no better.
It's not any better.
Whether it's involuntary from the state or from your own city or county, it doesn't matter. That's still the government taking from you involuntarily, and we've already been through the verses on that. But anyhow, what this measure does then is it stops that. And it not
What
only stops
stops
it
the
for 1
stealing?
year, stops the stealing, it puts the money back in your pocket, which helps. And I was sharing with Jason, our tech guy, a little bit about this, and hopefully I've got this right. But Arthur Laffer was a guy he was just an incredible economist, and he figured out the Laffer curve, and he was an advisor to Ronald Reagan. And what the Laffer curve does is that at a certain point of taxation, when you lower those taxes again after you get to a certain place on the curve, um, which is where we're at easily with property tax. When you lower it like Ronald Reagan did, although he lowered income tax, but still the same principle applies to any tax, the government revenue actually goes up, not down. And and for the most part, it goes back about halfway, almost halfway. So if you lower the taxes by $1 billion, which is about what this property tax would do, 1.3 a year, you're going to refill that about a $500 million. Why? Because the reality is that if Jason and Joel each get $1 back in their pocket, that dollar is going to cycle through the economy about 7 times a year. Well, what do you do with that dollar every time it gets spent? It
Gets
gets
taxed.
taxed on a voluntary transaction
Right.
where you
Right.
go to the store and spend it. Now multiply that times 1.3 billion and you've got yourself a $500 million return to the
coming
government
back.
revenue. So when people ask where the money's going to come from, well, half of it's going to return just
Just
by
by
doing
people.
nothing,
Yep.
just by people living and
Yep.
spending their money. And this is different. A lot of people say, well, they gave us a $500 whatever last session. That's true. But
That was a
this is,
one-time shot too.
it's
by
a
the way.
one-time shot. This is like whatever you're paying now, 2,000, 3, 4, 5,000, you get that back in your pocket. It cycles in the economy every single year. Plus, the government can't take your home.
Plus the fact that you're reducing your debt, most likely.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, we're well over $1 trillion in people's credit cards.
Yeah,
Think about
right.
that for a minute.
Yeah, we're hitting inflation, and this is the whole problem that we've got to start to see what is the role of government. And when the government gets involved in incentivizing, let's just pick on one. When they incentivize businesses, okay, which is a big thing for the Republican Party, they want to incentivize. Here's the problem: they call it corporate welfare or cronyism. This is when you either give a special, if you want, uh, uh, a business to come in so they get property tax relief to come into the town. But meanwhile, the grocery store and the cafe in
Everybody
town,
else
they
is
they didn't get any, and so it's unfair. But there's other ways that the government can get involved that are just it's a way of picking winners and losers. You know, whenever the government does that, whether it's hey business, we're going to give you a break but not the others, or we're going to subsidize you but nobody else. In fact, Joel has a
I do know of a story.
actual
I'm not going
example
to use the actual names here because too many people know all these different people.
to protect the innocent,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
but they bring in a business. They the government subsidizes it at 40%, and the business owners produce 60%. And everybody says, well, this is great because we're going to bring in a business that's going to hire 50 people, and we're going to bring in all kinds of business because of that, and we're going to do, they're going to need supplies. And so we have all these different entities providing all those supplies to this business. And we think everything's going to go great, except for one thing. It's managed by somebody that's not a good manager, which is almost always the case.
Sure.
And so then
Because they don't have to be.
that's right. They don't have to be because they got into the business at 60%. And they figure that it just can't go wrong. And so pretty soon it does go wrong. And now the government, because it borrowed the money to do that business in the first place,
Or took it from the taxpayer.
yeah, the government provided the 60% down payment, so that business has no money invested in it at all other than the loan they took out, and they're not going to pay back the loan because they can't afford to pay back the loan. So the lender then takes back the property and they sell it now for 60 cents on the dollar. And what I mean by that is 60 cents on what's owed. And and so that the bank or the financial institution that helped them took a loss of 40% on their loan. And now all of a sudden, that new owner starts off and he too just borrows the money because the government supplied the other 40% to put down on it. And the government, by the way, is taxpayer dollars. It's our money that's going into that. And some human being out there, or 20 human beings, decided that this was a good idea. Well, in the process of this, you have another business that bought everything at 100%. They paid dollar for dollar. They didn't get the 40% discount because they didn't want to be involved in the government subsidized business. And they're struggling in their business because they're competing now with this government subsidized business. And pretty soon, that business goes out of business again, or the private one goes out of business because they can't afford to go against it. And in fact, that has happened to many, many different businesses. Look what I'm going to say this. Look what happened to Walmart. Uh, we we saw during COVID, they were told, well, you're too big to close, and so you need to stay open. But all these other mom and pop shops,
Sure.
you got to shut down.
Again, picking winners,
Yep,
and you always have losers when you pick
yep.
the
And so
government.
another thing that they do is they hire all these. Again, I'm going to say this: they hired a whole bunch of Somalis. Well, so many of them. I would come to different stores and see people working or hear the stories of people working, and we're just standing around wondering what to do because they didn't have any clue of what to do because no one was there to teach them what to do. Um,
Mhm.
all kinds of different incentives coming from the government picking winners and losers, as
Yeah.
you've been saying. So,
And anytime the government picks a winner, whether it's through a subsidy or a property tax relief, there's always a loser. And that's what makes this unfair, which again is another reason why it's immoral. And that's why the two men in the Bible are talking about this. And we're promoting a yes vote on Measure 4. Now, um, the next probably couple shows, we're going to have the author, Rick Becker, Dr. Rick Becker, who authored this and it can answer any question that you throw at him and is a very, very solid measure. One of the things I know he will say is that, when you hear the opposition say, oh, if they get rid of this property tax, then you're not going to have,
good
fire
roads.
department
You're not going to have good
services
roads.
or yeah, or
You're not going to have
schools or
911.
yeah, you're not going to have all these services that you have now. Now, here, think about what the opposition is saying when they say that, especially if it's a legislator. What they're saying is, oh, we're going to continue with the corporate welfare or the winner picking winners, or we're going to continue with the waste. And Dr. Becker has a list of the millions upon millions of dollars of waste and unnecessary spending in the government. I mean, he's got a graph that shows out of our $19 billion budget, how easy it is to reduce the spending by just simply by waste.
Probably
So,
8 billion of that 19 billion could
right.
disappear in a heartbeat.
So think about this uh, when a person in opposition to this says, "Oh, we're going to lose our fire department." That's a big one that's out there. I mean, it's in they're quoting some fire department guy from central North Dakota in the North Dakota Living magazine, I think it is, the NDF, North Dakota Farmers Union, and all. They're quoting all this. They're in opposition based on fear and untrue things. And I'll tell you what that is. When they say you're going to lose your fire department or services from your fire department, what they're really admitting, and they don't necessarily realize this, oh, we're going to protect the government waste. Why aren't they saying we're gonna drop government waste? Oh, no, that what they're admitting is that we're gonna drop the fire department at the expense of leaving the waste.
Right, right.
So, it's just an absolutely ridiculous argument that has to be shot down.
And we're spending a lot of money outside of our state, which we shouldn't be spending money outside of our state.
Exactly.
Uh, so reciprocity, I think it is for students going to different
Yeah.
states, institutions, and then having them come to our institution is
There are so many places it would be easy. I mean, I can't remember the list, but stay tuned because when we have Dr. Becker on, we're probably gonna ask him just give a few examples of waste, and it'll amaze you. I mean, there's things like we're talking like $140 million for this and 95 million for that. It doesn't take you long to get to 500 million through
I
that.
think if we cleaned up some of the government waste, we'd probably instead of the 1.3 billion for property tax that we collect, we have probably $8 billion that we could be spending
Well,
back to the
yeah,
back to the places that
there's
actually
so many
need it.
ways to make this work. We're not even we haven't even counted yet the billions of dollars that are sitting perpetually with
Oh, sure.
in
Yep.
reserves
Yep.
that will continue to refill. So this this property tax measure for it does not depend on oil. Now, it's helpful to have oil,
Right.
but it's not completely dependent on oil. So when people are afraid that, well, what if we ever run out of oil? Our economy is going to change so much by the time that happens anyway, that even if we did depend on oil, which we don't, but even if we did, our economy is going to be so much better and we're going to be in a place to handle that.
Well, businesses will want to come here
Well, yeah,
if they don't have to pay taxes.
exactly. And, the Laffer, I mean, take your pick, but Rick Becker has some recommendations about what's one of the many ways that this could be funded without losing any services at all.
We wouldn't lose any services,
No,
folks. I think that's the fear
yes,
mongering that goes on, and we need to stop that stupidity. Um, all of those things that are required or needed, they will be covered. they will be
Yeah,
taken care
and
of.
and the reason they make that fearful, exaggerated arguments is because number one, they're assuming that we need a $19.5 billion, as if all this waste is needed.
Yeah.
They're assuming that they're forgetting the
Is
fact
that
that
19.5 for a
that's 2 years. Yeah,
2-year
sorry. Yeah,
prop?
so
Yep.
so 19. Yeah, that's a good point. $19 billion
So we
budget
really
for
need to divide that by 2,
yes.
getting it down to 9.5
Yeah,
billion a year, and then 1.3 billion a
a
year
year.
is for property tax.
Yeah.
So we're down to 8.2 billion. We could certainly run a
Well,
state on 8.2 billion
per year.
per
So
year.
that would
Yep.
be 2.6. Technically, I think what is going around is probably accurate. 2.6 billion every 2 years is
Yes. Yeah.
dropped from the
From the 19.
19.5.
Yep.
So we're down whatever. But I mean, on a $19 billion biennial budget,
Yep.
it's so easy, and it's perpetually easy. We're talking many
Yeah.
years.
This
It's
is
not just
every
like
single year.
it's not like, oh, we happen to have a few billion that we can do this one year. This is a perpetual thing
But
because
part
what
of it
they
is,
forget is
Jeff,
every citizen, every homeowner is going to get that back in their pocket.
yes. But also, part of it might be that there's a bunch of lobbyists out there saying that, well, my institution, whatever it might be, needs these funds, and
Yeah.
so they'll put money in people's
Well,
coffers for their
well, here's the lies that we encourage all of you, and the fear that a lot of you can push back on. Get informed, and then push back on. There's a group called Keep It Local, I think it's called, with OBAN. Push back on those guys because they're fearing and lying. Bob Harms has a group. I don't know what it's called. Push back. Pat Finken. Push back. The
They
superintendents.
are actually lying to you. Bob
Yeah.
and Pat are lying to
Some of
you.
them are willfully lying. There's legislators like Brad Beckedahl who's written in the Williston paper now. Everybody's jumping on this bandwagon, and what they're really doing is how are they lying? By reframing the argument. So
Right.
how they reframe it is that they're trying to convince you, first of all, like I said, that we have to have a $19 billion budget
We
to
don't.
survive for 2 years, and it's absolutely ridiculous because the proof is South Dakota. Okay. How many years ago we were in line with for many years because we're similar. We're similar size, population. And so we were running together. In fact, we were actually used to have a lower budget than South Dakota. And we should because they actually have a couple of big cities that we don't have. They have Sioux City and Sioux Falls. Our biggest is Fargo. Everything is lower after that. We're mostly small towns and farms. We don't have a metropolitan area. So it we have to watch out for that. We not to let the fear mongers win your mind.
Well, also, just to bring it to everybody's attention, you all are paying property tax, whether you think you are or not.
Yeah,
How you're doing that is if you rent property from anybody, you are paying property tax.
right.
You're the person that's paying for that, not the landowner. The landowner, yes, he or she is the one that has to write out the check for it, but you are the ones that are writing out the check to them so that they can write out that check.
Right.
So,
So when we have Rick Becker on, which will probably be next time, I'm guessing, we're going to ask him about some other questions and arguments that are actually really valid questions, like what about out-of-staters? What about townships if what are they going to do after a few years? Because everybody's made whole with the 2024 level, but what happens when
in the
in
future,
the future? So Rick's got really good answers for all of that. We're going to save those harder questions for him. But just to put up, if Jason would put up this one more time, so everybody can see what you're going to vote on November 5th. We got 1 minute left,
so
and
a yes vote
a
gets
yes
rid
vote
of the
gets
taxes,
rid of the taxes, and
and
that's what we want.
a no vote says you want to keep paying taxes.
And keep in mind, this is every year. It's in the Constitution, which provides certainty for businesses. But this is what you're going to do, and this will happen for in perpetuity. I think that's the word. So a yes vote supports prohibiting. Oh, here, let's do this. A yes vote, which is what we're promoting on Measure 4, right there, on your ballot, November 5th, you will, by voting yes, you will prohibit the state and local governments from levying taxes on the assessed value of a home, except if you're bonded. And so if you're in debt, if the city or school owes money because they took out a loan, they're not off the hook there. You have to finish paying that off still. But this is the biggest and most fair tax. I challenge anybody to suggest any tax cut that is more fair than this and as big. I don't think there is one. So there you go. Vote yes on 4. See y'all.